Thank you, Sophie. I hope you can hear me and see me. I'm talking from London in the UK, where currently it's the hottest day of the year, 40 degrees.
Oh, wow.
So
I heard the buildings are going to melt.
Yes, indeed. And trains are not functioning.
Oh, wow. That does sound hot.
But well, good afternoon and good evening to all of you. I'll now share my screen where I'll give you a presentation of my current project in virtual reality. Can you hear it? Can you see it? Can you see my screen now? I should be able to
all good now.
see now my full presentation. Perfect. Okay, so I'm currently a PhD student and I'm conducting research in virtual reality applied to English language education to foster negotiation and opinion sharing. Now, a key concept of using virtual reality in hybrid language learning is flexibility. And I'll show you now a quote that I think it embodies this principle. Because as Tony Robbins said, if we as teachers decide to implement virtual reality in language educational contexts, we need to have our minds fixed on what the objectives are, but then be flexible in our approach to let students reach such objectives. And in the past 2 years, where we've been grappling with teaching online and also in person, this has become of paramount importance. And I think there are three main concepts that underpin flexibility in language education with technology. The first is granting the blended modalities, allowing for students to experience remote and in-person experiences so that this can add a lot of variety to the language classroom. Secondly, if we use technology, we need to ensure that interactions are supported and also communication in the target language. Another aspect is that flexibility is highly determined by the affordances of learning spaces. In a traditional classroom, flexibility was very much contained within classroom walls, in the sense that teachers could add some variety and flexibility in the kind of activity that they proposed, but it ended there. It never went outside of classroom walls. But with the integration of technology, we see a dramatic change. Students can join classes online or also bring their own devices into the classroom. And with the introduction of virtual reality, this is even more enhanced as students might be sharing physically the same space, but they are involved in immersive experiences. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with the concept of virtual reality, I'll provided you with a definition. So it's an advanced form of human-computer interactions where users can interact with virtual objects and with other individuals, but they are immersed in native-like environments. And this concept might look like sci-fi for some people, but it's actually something that we use on a daily basis. There are two types of virtual reality. The first one, the one that we know the most, is non-immersive virtual reality, in the sense that we are using an application on a desktop, but we are surrounded by the real world. In immersive virtual reality, on the other hand, the only perceived reality that we have is the one provided by virtual reality headsets, like huge glasses that you might have seen on some ads by Meta. Now, this last part of VR is the one that I'm mostly interested in. And I will now refer to it as IVR, so immersive virtual reality. Now, there are some drawbacks of using it for language education, and we as teachers need to be very much aware of it. So students are cognitively overloaded by information, virtual visual information, which might lead to distractions and also a feeling of motion sickness, in the sense that because students can move in virtual spaces, their brains do not record the physical movement, and this might result in feeling a little bit dizzy or even some nausea. It doesn't happen for everybody, but it might happen. And another important element is that if we want to conduct language sessions in virtual reality, they should be limited in terms of time, as the more time students spend in virtual worlds, the more likely they are to feel distracted. So I believe that to counteract these drawbacks is, of course, super important to create virtual experiences that are flexible and varied in nature. So talking about variety, virtual reality experiences need to allow for self-exploration of virtual environments and also allow students to situate their learning in practical contexts where they can use the language in recognizable settings. But also they need to be able to experience this variety. And this is something that virtual reality, as I will show you in a little while, greatly affords, as this enables motivation and the active participation of students. If we then consider flexibility, first of all, activities and IVR are extremely adaptable to learners' needs. Secondly, the feedback that students get is immediate because they interact with objects, but they also interact with people in the form of avatars. This allows for enhanced collaboration and also allows students to freely choose the kind of language forms that they would like to use and the people that they would like to interact with. And this constitutes the basis of social language learning, which is at the heart of my research, because as you can see from this definition, it allows students to embody the experience as they can use a variety of interactions. They can interact with objects, they can interact with people. And I'm sure that you all know that there's nothing that better than learning a language by experiencing it, not only studying it on books. But what do we mean by social language learning? So I tend to refer to it more as pro-social behaviours, when especially I'm interested in two aspects. First, negotiations, and the second is the ability of sharing opinions. They are the heart of cooperative language learning, because when students are engaged in negotiations, they are in a process where they are encouraged to make choices. They might not make it at the end, but at least the tasks involve them in such a way that they can negotiate choices, but also freely express their opinions, because the aim is to reach a common goal. And this is of paramount importance for collaborative problem solving, but also to minimize any possible conflicts. And these are skills that are not applicable only in language learning contexts, but that then they can be taken outside of the classroom and applied by the students on a daily basis. So there's a little bit of a checklist to make before applying IVR in language learning. So first of all, teacher training and students training on tool use. It's fundamental. Secondly, teachers must be aware that they are monitors, they are facilitators, not authoritative teachers. And they must be aware of the pedagogical implications of using virtual reality for language learning. And the other bit is ensuring that IVR, virtual reality experiences, are included in an appropriate methodological framework. And what I normally use, maybe some of you might be familiar with it, is task-based methodology. So this was elaborated by Willis, and it consists of involving students in subsequent task phases. The first one, in the pre-task, students are brainstormed on the activities, they are instructed on what they have to do, they are trained on the tools, and secondly, they do the actual task. But as I wrote here, it's based on group work. So this framework is perfect for group activities, as then students need to plan their presentations and present it to the rest of the class. Now, in the post-task phase, that's when a more of a focus is placed on language forms. Students analyze the forms that they have encountered during the activities, and then they conduct further practice. The role of technology in this framework is key, because it supports knowledge, It allows students to conduct the task, plan it and present it, and finally also to practice in their target language. Now, this also poses some challenges. For us teachers, it's really challenging to design pro-social virtual reality experiences, often because we are dealing with applications that are already made and not usually made specifically for language learning. Secondly, integrating virtual reality in task-based language learning is not an easy task. So here's why I prepared as a project that I am going to deliver to a group of English language students in Italy. And it consists of, well, it's based on the task-based language learning framework that I've just shown you. But I'm also involving students in creating a digital product that it's not necessarily made for language learning, but it can be used and accessed by any user on the web. And the purpose is task attainment through increased negotiations and opinion sharing. The way that I'm going to involve students in these tasks is by using an application that I'll show you in a minute. So this is my current project. My research question is investigating the effects of virtual reality on negotiation and sharing of opinions. Then I will involve 12 participants. 6 will be in an experimental group and 6 in a control group. The experimental group will use a virtual reality application called Immerse, while the control group will use a non-immersive VR application, ThingLink, which I'm sure that Sophie will be sharing with you on the chat. And both groups will use izi.Travel to plan a digital tour of the city of Siena. And I will strongly recommend using this application within your classrooms because it's free, it's accessible on computers, it's accessible on phones, and it really allows students to create a digital tour of any city that they like by recording their audios and let users follow their destinations of their choices on Google Maps. And the aim, as I said, is the creation of a tour, and the research period will be between October and November 2022. The data collection methods are going to be through observations, content analysis, and focus group interviews. Now, the activity structure is going to be blended. Students will be firstly trained on technology. They will be involved in a task cycle consisting of reading an existing text, selecting destinations, doing presentations. But while the experimental group will do this in virtual reality, the control group will do this on Zoom using non-immersive virtual reality. Only in the last part, students will work together, provide feedback, guided analysis, and self-assessment of their performance. And here we come to the application. So Immerse has been created purposefully as a language learning platform for English, but now they are extending it to other languages such as Italian, Japanese, French, and it's accessed via Oculus Quest 2 headsets, which are slightly expensive, but they are getting more and more popular, and I'm sure that it will be increasingly adopted in language learning education contexts. So there's a teacher interface and a student interface. In the teacher interface, us as teachers join the platform and guide students through a series of prompts provided by the application. But then students are left on their own. They do the tasks by interacting with each other. They can take selfies, but also, as you see here, interact with virtual objects in the space. As an example, these are a couple of pictures that I've taken during my initial trial of the project. So you can see here that students are involved in the same environment. They use hand controllers, they are trained on using Immerse, but also the application izi.Travel, as this will be the dashboard that they will use to create a digital language tour while immersed in the application. Then, the application Immerse offers several different environments. They all look like potentially real contexts, and each of which has its own affordances. For instance, this one, the networking room, I will use it so that students can do reading activities and select destinations. In the presentation room, Students have a backstage where they can decide who is going to talk about which part of their presentation, and they can really plan organically their speech. And then, I know it's a little bit dark, but that was the nature of the environment. They go on a stage and actually present it to a virtual audience, which may consist of other classmates joining in and just sitting down and listening to their peers. So an experience will look like this. So students join as avatars. They are well, these prompts are in Italian, but it's the same kind of principle of us teacher activate prompts, and then students can go there, touch the cards, and see them just as if they were in a real world. And then they can write on in the space, they can take selfies, but they are constantly prompted throughout it. So I activate a prompt and students see automatically in a kind of a smartwatch that they have, and they're just going to lift their hand and see my indications. On the other hand, on immersive VR, ThingLink allows for some interactions, but they are limited to the virtual, like the desktop environment. You can add as a planner, you can add some tags on interactive tags, but you see they're limited, like in the sense of the kind of engagement that they allow and afford. So, but however, I put here the link, which is also in the chat, so that you can look at it a little bit more closely at the end of the presentation. So, but at the end of the task, students should be able to create this. And this is the platform izi.Travel that I was talking to you about. And it's really interesting because it allows you to upload pictures, but also provide feedback on the tools that have been created. As I said, it's entirely free, and users plan it on computers, but then it's accessible and easier to use on mobile phones. To wrap up, I expect that involving students in immersive virtual reality would lead to increased negotiations and sharing of opinions, in the sense that students will be more inclined to ask for clarifications, opinions, listening to feedback, resolve conflicts, and mediate amongst the decisions. In conclusion, I believe that IVR can be incorporated in task-based language learning, but it's also a very effective tool to boost interactions, offer some sort of pre-reality training, and foster team working skills in order to enable students to professionally interact then in the real world once they're off their screens. This is all for me now. I hope I was on time with my presentation, but if you'd like to learn more about Immerse, Sophie has shared the company link and their manifesto, which is accessible on YouTube. And I'll leave you with some references, and if you have any questions, you can type them in the chat or write to me at the following address. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Ilaria. Thanks for sharing your research and your project with us, and it was really interesting to hear about how you're using VR in this project-based learning, this task-based learning, and I think we're all very interested to hear about your research and your findings, because I think they're quite critical for us at the moment to be learning about these things. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.